Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the Legal Paige podcast. Today's guest is the lovely Iffy. She is your just-in-case lawyer. You're listening to the Legal Paige podcast, where we chat about life and business with a legal twist. I'm Paige, attorney and photographer helping online businesses and creatives tackle their business dreams without breaking out in hives. No more legal mumbo jumbo. This podcast features simple, bite-sized advice that'll have you legally legit in no time. Are you ready? Let's get started. Now, Iffy Ibekwe spent over 10 years of her legal career working for a Texas nonprofit. She was totally burnt out, and she really wanted to spend quality time with her husband and her 3 kids before the end of the day. Existing in a visionless rut and giving herself and her family leftovers just wasn't cutting it. So Iffy wanted to give her family the best, so she intentionally started her own law practice to experience peace and secure her family in a way that lets her rest easy at night. And now, you guys, she helps other people do the same. Iffy helps intentional women prepare effective wills, trusts, and legal documents so that their families are protected in the event of a death or unexpected emergency. Now, you guys, Iffy is super passionate about what she does. Obviously, her life has been transformed by helping women protect themselves and their families. And I have been following Iffy. We are both attorneys and virtual lawyers. I love that she does estate planning for millennial women, and that is what we are talking about today. This is going to be an amazing podcast episode because we go into all of the details that we as online business owners need to prepare for and the things we don't think about because we often don't like to think about the what ifs and things that could happen potentially in the future. You guys, Iffy is going into wills and trusts and powers of attorney, living wills, HIPAA directives. One of my favorite things she talks about is how we can protect our digital assets since we all have them and run online businesses, pet directives, you name it. Let's get started on this episode because it is so good. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed talking to Iffy. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the Legal Paige podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I am overly excited because we have another lawyer on today. Iffy Ibekwe is here to talk all about estate planning for millennial women. Hello, Iffy. So glad you're here.
I am so excited to be here, Paige.
We are just so blessed to have you on and your expertise with estate planning. I'm sure that lots of people tuning in today are like, holy moly, why is Paige and Iffy talking about estate planning? And what does this have to do with me? Well, you guys, you are in for a treat because she's going to tell you why it's really important. Iffy, I know you and we've been virtual friends for a while and we just met like face-to-face via Zoom, which is awesome. Welcome to the virtual world, everyone. But I have just been following you and I love what you're doing and I love how you're empowering women with your estate planning background. But I would love it if you could introduce yourself to the legal pagers tuning in today, tell them what you do, why you do it, and kind of your life path with the law.
Well, my name is Iffy Ibekwe and I'm so happy to be on your podcast page. Like I said earlier, I have been practicing law for about 13 years, but I recently decided to hang up my own shingle, as they say in the law, because I wanted a more focused practice that gave me flexibility. Like I'm sure a lot of your entrepreneurs went into business for themselves for similar reasons. And I primarily practice estate planning, and that means wills, setting up trusts, and other legal documents that help you protect your loved ones for those just-in-case moments, which is why I like to call myself the just-in-case lawyer. I'm your just-in-case lawyer to help you plan for all the curveballs that life can bring. And I especially like to speak to women.
That's awesome. So let's dig in a little more to the just in case. Can you extrapolate on that a little bit? What are you meaning by that? And why do people need to prepare now for life events that could or could not happen?
Well, okay. So I came up with a just in case tagline because honestly, it's easier than saying I'm in estate planning. When people think of estate, they think, oh, well, I'm not a Kardashian, so I really can't relate to estates. I mean, my generation, you'd say you're not a Ewing, like on Dallas,
Right.
but or I should say my parents' generation, but I watched it too. But basically, I say just in case because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. You don't know what the next moment is going to bring. And there are ways that you can plan legally to prepare so that, for example, say you are traveling and you're in an accident and you're incapacitated, you can appoint somebody to be your medical power of attorney so they can help you make medical decisions. Doesn't mean that this will ever happen, but in the random chance that it does happen, you have a way to say, okay, if anything happens to me, my sister Jenny is going to be the one who's going to take care of my medical decisions, or my brother John can take care of getting into my bank with a financial power of attorney and take care of my financial decisions. In worst case scenario, if you pass away and say you have all this stuff that you've accumulated, you have a business, you have pets, you have children, you have a spouse, you can set up a will to say how to close up your life. And you can appoint somebody to do that for you. And that's the sort of thing I help women set up for themselves and their families.
Oh, I love it. My biggest question, and I'm sure lots of people are thinking this as well, is why is it important for single women to do this? Because I feel like lots of people don't even think about wills and life planning and any of that stuff until honestly they partner up and get married or have kids. So why is it important to always think about this sometimes before that happens?
Because just because you're single does not mean that you are going to be exempt from these just in case moments. Just because you're single doesn't mean that life won't happen to you in a way that having one of these documents would be beneficial. For example, I have a client and she called me because she was going to visit her family overseas. And she's not convinced that she needs to estate plan because she's single, she has no kids, she's just globetrotting, in Europe, and then she's going to be in South America later this summer. And I told her, I said, what if something happens to you while you're away? What's going to happen to what's going to happen to your house? What's going to happen to your pet? What's going to happen to your bank accounts and all the money that you worked hard to earn and all of the business that you've built up and all of that? What is going to happen to it? Do you want to decide what's going to happen to it and to you? Or do you want the state to decide? Because whether or not you create a will, you can have one you create yourself, or the state creates something called a will for you. And because they're laws, they're called intestate laws, INTESTATE laws. And that allows the state to decide what to do with your stuff. And sometimes the state just ends up taking your stuff if there's no one to collect it because it just becomes its property. And so as a single person, it does matter, your life matters. And I'm passionate about telling this to single people because that's the demographic that least prepares for getting their estate plan done, getting a powers of attorney done, like I mentioned earlier, or just any kind of setup to pass over their stuff. And who pays the burden? Your family is going to have to do it at their cost and at their inconvenience. If something were to happen to you, they're dealing with that and having to manage your life because you chose not to. So that's really a big reason.
Oh, you hit the nail on the head there. And it actually coincides too with what I preach about with contract law. It's default state rules. And it works the same way with estates and wills. And when something happens, the state takes over, which is what you were just talking about. And that's what that's what I preach all the time is like, why wouldn't you write a contract yourself and lay out all of the things that you want done in case some bad situation were to occur in later years or tomorrow.
Right.
And because we don't want to go to the default state contract rules. Because honestly, they're usually not beneficial to you. And like you said, you don't want the state to take over things. And we don't want to leave our families with this like mess, I would like to call this pile of things that needs to be taken care of. And it costs them money. That is one of the biggest things I see, not only with contract law, but with estate law as well, is it's so much money if you don't take a proactive step toward getting your estate plan now.
And that's so true. And, I was telling Paige before we got on the recording, the last 2 cases I've worked on have had to deal with someone who's 24 and another person who was 34 years old. So I'm not talking grandparents here. In the last month, I'm dealing with people who are in my demographic, the millennials, and seeing their parents who were both out of state have to hire a lawyer to come down to Austin, where I live, pay hourly to figure out how to close up their children's lives. I wish us all a long, prosperous life, but the reality is that doesn't happen. And I see the agony and the pain that they're going through losing a child, as well as now, they didn't have a will. So how do we get this life insurance? And how do we get into their bank account? How do we pay the car note? And it's a nightmare. And so it is a mess. When you use the word mess, it truly is a mess. It can be dealt with, but the dealing with it is the expense and just the time and the inconvenience to your family.
Yeah. And not only that, when you were saying like, you're just stringing out this process for your family, and I wouldn't want that for my family. Like the pain would probably be obviously incredibly hard enough. Right. So I would rather alleviate that pain if I can now. So with that being said, we won't be any more morbid, you guys. But it's a reality, and that's what we're here for. That's why there are people like Iffy who do estate planning. It's so important. And as business owners, we're so focused on our business, and we forget about we don't live in W-2 world anymore. We might not have all of these things prepped in terms of life insurance and 401ks. And you're only thinking about those type of things, those financials that are so readily tangible and you can see them and their dollar signs and their money. But the one thing I've noticed, Iffy, is the people I work with and the business owners I talk to we were talking about this before we started, 25 to 35. They're mostly millennial women, and they have no idea even why, how to start with estate planning. So I love what you're going to teach today, and I think it's going to be super beneficial for them. So let's jump into it. All about estate planning. Let's first talk about the statistics here.
Okay. So I like to call this, hey, millennial women, estate planning is for you too, because I believe that estate planning is for everyone. And just to muddy the water some more, I just want to tell you that if I say estate planning, I'm talking about a will or other legal documents that have to do with your life. I might call it generational planning, legacy planning. There are so many ways to talk about it, but you can just think of estate planning, just think of a will and a trust, or a will and your powers of attorney. So yes. You get confused. That is what estate planning is. And no, you don't have to be rich in order to have an estate. All of us have an estate, even if you feel like, all I have is debt and bills. Well, you still have a life that would need to be closed up. And so that is your estate. It's everything that you have amassed in this life. That's a good way of thinking about it. Okay. And so I really like to speak to millennial women because I'm one of them. I'm on the very beginning of the block, but I'm still there. So
there you are. You're here.
I'm a millennial. I'm on the gram. Anyway, I didn't make Snapchat, but I was still on Instagram, so I feel like I'm in there.
You're in there. You're in.
Yeah. And I just want to go through some stats about just what I think is so amazing about our demographic of women. About 72% of us work. We are actively fighting the gender pay gap, asking for what we are worth and yes. Going out there and having the mindset to be able to receive it, not feeling like an imposter. And, the statistics show us that more than 28% of women like us start a business because they see an opportunity. And that's what I did. I saw an opportunity to start a law firm that specializes in speaking to women, speaking in their language, not being stuffy and and being all legal easy. So I'm talking above you, but I'm like, hey, girl, I'm like you. Here's what I did for my family, and I will show you the way, right? And we're really educated, and we can do this. This is not brain surgery. This is just specific planning so that you can take care of your family. Most millennials, whether they're women or not, have not done any estate planning. In fact, 60% of Americans haven't done any kind of estate planning, which means that a lot of people leave that decision to their loved ones, and they are the ones who bear the burden and the expense, if they can handle it, to take care of it. And you don't have to be like that. And after today, you won't have to be like that.
Oh my gosh, 60%. That's insane. And yeah, we, unlike other generations, we as females, we're not afraid to do the big things, and we have the education to do it, and we have the smarts, and we, like I like to say, we have the balls to do it. So let's do it.
Yes, big cojones, and we can do it, and it's for all of us.
Okay, so what do we need? How do we start?
Okay, so I'm just going to talk about some of the documents. So get out your pens and start writing it down, or your computers if you're modern. There are certain documents that need to be prepared and adequately executed, which means they need to be signed correctly. And this is why I don't like LegalZoom, because when you go to court, those wills get thrown out all the time. Yeah, you got it for $250, but guess what? It's invalid, or it wasn't executed properly, which means it wasn't signed properly, and maybe you didn't have the right amount of witnesses or the notary or whatever that needs. And so you need to be aware that this, while it seems expensive, it can be very expensive on the back end. So I really stand against doing the LegalZoom route. I think that you can find a lawyer that can help you do better than that. Mm-hmm. So the first document is your last will and testament. It's what you think about when you think of a will. And basically, this is a document. It's a way of writing down how you want all of your personal stuff to be given away when you die. Mm-hmm. You can say, you can choose somebody to be something called an executor, which is basically the person you would choose to close up your life. For me, I have my husband and he has me, but there's some people who choose a best friend or a sibling. They're the ones who are going to make sure that all your wishes in your will are carried out. They also pay any debts that you have, and they will be in court making sure to close up your life for you. And so that's the first document that I recommend. If you have children, you might consider setting up a trust. If you have a business, you might consider setting up a trust. It's a little bit more complicated, and I won't go into trust right now unless you want me to, Paige. But a trust is another legal document that can work in tandem with your will and help you put away assets. So, for example, I have a trust for my family, and I'm not, rolling in the Bill Gates type money here. Mm-hmm. But I have 3 children. And so basically I've set up a trust. When I pass away, or in a case that my husband and I pass away, we have certain accounts that are going to fund the trust. And then we have people appointed to take care of our children. But that trust is going to pay for their health, their education, their maintenance, and their support. So if they get a car at 16, hopefully they don't get a car at 16, but hopefully if they want to study abroad while they're in college, if they want to go to graduate school, we are going to have enough money in there. And I'll talk about ways to do this, even if you're broke, in a second, for them to be able to enjoy the same quality of life because I've set up a trust for them.
That's perfect. Yeah. I always get questions about the difference between wills and trusts too. And I like to think about it for like business purposes and for children and for anyone that we need to like continue to care for in the future.
Yes.
Trusts are much better just because a will just kind of is like a bucket pouring over, and there's really no, there's no one that's taking care of the money that's pouring out of this bucket.
Right.
And with a trust, you can set it up exactly how you want that money to continue on in the future for like your children, or if you have a lot of business assets and you need to just like disseminate those somehow if something were to happen to you. But yeah, like you said, we don't need to go too much. Trusts are sometimes very complicated for people to grasp the concept of. But what else? What else do we need besides the basic living will and testament, and then a potential trust?
Well, you definitely need something called a financial power of attorney, and that allows you to appoint someone to be your agent to help you in either a limited capacity or a general capacity for finances. I always think about this as something you could have right now. If you are out of state and need someone to get into your business bank account or your personal bank account that's not listed on your account, they can use a financial power of attorney to go in and do transactions for you. They can cut checks. They can pay your mortgage for you. They can do anything that you would give them the ability to do. And so that, as a single woman, as a married woman, as whomever you are, is something that you should already have in your arsenal.
Yes, I'm going to just pause here and be like,
Sure.
all of you listening that travel a lot,
Yeah,
which is probably 90% of you, you need to go get a financial power of attorney like ASAP, because you want to designate someone to be able to get into your funds if you need them to, because things happen all the time. Like let's just be honest. It doesn't necessarily have to do with something morbid. Like, you could have everything stolen if you're traveling and someone needs to get into a bank account for you.
This is why these things are in existence. It's not because you can just store them away. It's because they're active living documents that come into play like when life happens, and you want to be prepared so that you're not stuck on the phone calling everybody you know and they're telling you, well, they won't give me access to that. Here's what they need. And then you're just trying to get it done, find a notary to notarize it. And, it's just nonsense. And so do it now. It's the best time to do it is when you have no emergency.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so we also need a medical power of attorney, right?
Yes, a medical power of attorney. Now, this is similar to a financial power of attorney in that you appoint an agent that can make decisions for you if you can't do so because you're incapacitated. That's the difference here. A doctor has to certify that you cannot make decisions for yourself. And then this person will be able to essentially be you and make decisions in your best interest. For example, if you need an MRI or you need some certain type of treatment and you can't consent because you're just not able to, this person would do that for you.
Right. And I just want to hit home here as well for all of you single women out here. And Iffy, you can totally answer this for me. Why is it important for us? Because with state laws, when they go into place, obviously our partners would be the person to make that decision. But why does it sometimes get messy for single people?
Well, it gets really messy, and it depends. I don't want to go down a wormhole, but it depends on the hospital and where you are, okay? There are people who think, oh, well, automatically the spouse should get to make that decision. And it depends. Sometimes they will, and sometimes they'll be like, no, we really need, the hospital will ask you for this. We need you to authorize. If you're in a partnership or you're dating someone and they're your person, which is awesome, you need especially to make sure that they have it, because they're not going to have any of those rights that might be afforded to someone who's married. Mm-hmm. And they're going to tell you cannot have access. And I'll talk about the next form. It actually pigeonholes really well. I don't know if that's the term. But it's another form. It's called a HIPAA directive. Mm-hmm. And this is what you think about when you go to the doctor's office or the dentist and you say, who else can have access to your medical records if they call? You can list everybody. And this is where you put all the need to know people in your life. So if you've got that partner, you've got that boyfriend, your spouse, your cousin, your siblings, your parents, your in-laws, you list them all on here, because in that situation where if you find yourself in the hospital and they're calling you, they're like, we're trying to find out what happened to Jane, you can say, and I have this HIPAA directive which lets me have access to her medical situation.
That's good.
And so medical power attorney is even stronger than that, because you are that person in all respects. And so this is so important. If you have certain people who would take care of you if something were to happen to you, they need to have that medical power of attorney and that directive that allows them to have access to your records.
Yes, 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 yes. I'm just nodding my head over here because I'm loving everything you're preaching. Okay. Obviously, people get confused about this. Like, where do I say if I want to continue to be on life-preserving measures? Like,
so good.
Where is that in my medical power of attorney, or is it in some other document?
It's another document. Thank you for the lead-in. It's called a living will, or it can be called an advance directive.
Mhm.
And whenever I have my clients do their signings where they come in and they sign everything and we get it notarized and witnessed if needed, they always pause on this document. So a living will is exactly what Paige just described. It allows your family to know what your last wishes would be. In Texas, we have one that speaks to if you're in a terminal condition or if you're in an irreversible condition where the doctor has determined that you are not going to survive for more than 6 months. In that case, you can and you're incapacitated. Okay. That's the biggie. It's not just you got a terminal illness. They're going to pull the plug. You cannot consent for yourself. You're incapacitated. You have the option of stating whether you would like to be kept comfortable and pass on, let me be on pain meds and, and when my time comes, let me go, or whether you would want life-sustaining treatments that are available at that time. And we don't know what's going to be available in the future. So this might be 10 years down the road. We don't know how they're going to keep you preserved, right? And so there are some people who are like, I don't want to live like that. Give me some good pain meds and let me go on to glory. And then there are other people who are like, hey, science is amazing. Feed me, breathe me, do everything you can, put me in a hyperbaric chamber, whatever it is to preserve me until, something could happen. And that's a choice that you make because the last thing you want, and I have a couple of friends and family, I have a lot of family who are doctors actually. They tell me when people don't set up their living will, which you don't want to confuse that with a last will and testament. It's a living will. It's a terrible name that they've chosen because it's confusing. But when you have this living will, it helps make those decisions because what happens at the hospital is people are like, Mom would have wanted to go. She wouldn't have wanted all this. No, I think Mom would have wanted all of this. And you can keep your family member in limbo fighting over something about how to keep you alive or not, when you could just let them know, hey, I don't want to be here anymore.
And this is like huge family debates. And and you could literally like lose all trust and relationships can be completely dissolved because of this. So that is like one of the biggest things that I have seen as an issue. Like personally, I've been involved in this with media family and I'm just like, it's the worst. Like you don't want to fight over that. You're already you're already devastated enough that, and you exactly said what I was thinking. I was like, everyone thinks they know you better than the next person. And so they're just going to continue to fight to be like, oh, that's what Paige would have wanted. That's what Paige would have wanted instead of just telling them what I would have wanted.
Right. And it's also one of those things where it was like, well, Mom told me once in 2012 that if, and it brings up all of these conversations that you may not have been party to. And maybe she did say that, but maybe she's changed her mind. Just let them know, let your parents know, let your loved ones know, hey, I know I'm young. I've done this because I thought that this was important to figure out and I don't want to break up the family. And I'm really passionate about this one. I've done it myself. I don't preach anything that I am not doing and have not done for my own family. They know when Iffy goes, just keep her comfortable. Do not sustain me. I'm going home to meet Jesus. I'm okay with that, and it makes you think of the fact that we have finite lives and that's okay to be scared about it, but you can still take back some power by making a decision in that.
Yeah. And I think it's really important for us to like take a second, right? And to think about it because oftentimes that's one of those things that all of us brush under the rug for another day because that's scary and we don't want to think about it, but you don't want something to happen tomorrow and then leave your family in this predicament that's going to tear them apart when it's good for us to like sit and be like, what would we want if we were in that situation? Because it's not something you think about every day. It's something you unfortunately think about when something bad happens in your life or a friend's life or your family's life. And then you're like, what would I want in that situation? Or you see how bad it can get with people fighting, or you see someone in a situation where you're like, actually, I don't want to be on life preserving measures. That's where I'm at. I've like seen it and I'm just like, no, thank you. Yeah. Same with you. I just keep me comfortable, but if that's the way the Lord wants me to go, like I will do it.
Amen.
And that's just what my life path was supposed to be. Okay, so enough about living wills, because we can go on about these, and people are like, "Whoa, you two are just."
So we are heavy with the death here.
You talked a little bit about HIPAA directives with medical power of attorneys, but why don't you just hit that home real quick for people?
Oh, yeah. That's the one where you list all the people that you would want to basically have access to you if something happened and you were in the hospital or in a situation where they needed to find out the results of your tests or something like that. They could just call without having to call your loved one or your spouse and bothering them. Essentially, it's kind of, I think of it as just like a coverall. Whoever is on your need to know list should just be on this. And
Perfect.
they could receive a copy of this, so they can do that. And it goes into effect immediately. So you might want to pick the people wisely. If they're snooping and they're like, well, is she going through fertility treatments? I mean, like, it is that accessible. So pick wisely, but these are the people who you would want to know.
Okay. Got it. I'm pretty sure I need to write one of those up now that I'm thinking about. Okay. What's next?
So this is fun. Okay. So, when someone dies on Facebook, and most of us have experienced this, and then you have that awkwardness of like their Facebook is still up, and then people start leaving messages and leaving all sorts of like, notices for them, and we'll miss
awkward and uncomfortable. And I'm like, why are people doing this? I don't know what's happening, but I think I need to respect that. I don't know.
I know. I'm like, I'm not going to post because they're not there. And it's just like that awkwardness where you want to acknowledge it. Well, what happens to stuff like that? What happens to your Gmail account? What happens to all your photographs, your Instagram posts, anything that you've put on MySpace, LinkedIn? I mean, like, we can go all the way back. And if you think about your digital footprint, like for sure, my whole adult life has been spent setting up information online.
Yeah.
So when you pass away, you need someone to help clean up your digital footprint. And you can do this by setting up somebody who's going to have access to these accounts to close them down. And that often is your executor or trustee, depending on how you set up your will or a trust. And they can help you close up your life. They can have specific access. So you can have like a memorial Facebook page. I don't know if any of your listeners have seen those, or completely shut it down, so that it's not awkward 20 years from now to be on there still, and these are silly sounding considerations, but truly, I mean, you may not care, you're dead, but you may not want your stuff just out there.
Yeah. And it's like challenging to get on those. Yeah. I mean, we've all kind of experienced this in some way or shape or form where you're wondering like why things aren't being taken down. And I know from experience that some parents of unfortunately I've had people that I've grown up with pass away for whatever reason, and their parents can't get access to their accounts. It's kind of a nightmare because there's so much lock and key in this digital world, and people do not think about that. And so digital directive, love that.
Right. And you can't, just because you have your password, you're not allowed to go in there and just continue their account for them. That is not, and you need to read the terms of service for all of these sites we're on. They have specific instructions about what to do when someone dies and how to close up their account or how you want to preserve their account. But just because you have a password, that's not enough. I think it's good to have a list of all your passwords, because in the instance that you're incapacitated or you die, there is somebody who has access to that and can give that to your executor who can then do what they do in their role as your representative to do your wishes for those things.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm like, my hands are up in the air right now because I'm sitting here being like, who else is sitting here listening? I do this, but I want you to do this.
Right.
I'm the only one who is the master of all things and knows all of my passwords to all of my things online. Well, if nobody else does, this is not a good thing. So make sure you're telling one person. Like, if you could get anything out of this episode, hopefully you're getting a whole lot more. But for all of us millennials here and business owners, like, please please, like within the hour, just tell someone where all of your passwords are, or like put it somewhere in like, there's all these key safes and all these apps and all of these things. Tell your partner, tell your mom, tell your kids, tell your wife, like
tell your wife, tell your kids, hide your wife, hide your kids.
Yeah, like tell somebody where these passwords are and write them down. I love that. And then get a digital asset directive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And any solid estate plan should have that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But part of it is the communication for all of these things. Part of it is letting the people you've picked know, because you need to let them know where they can find this, that make sure they have a copy. And that's the sort of thing that LegalZoom, or I should say a DIY type site, won't help you with, because they're not going to be able to counsel you on the practical. You can get all of this done and then do nothing and still be a nightmare for your family. So
yes. All of the things. Okay. This one is a little bit more specific, but I think it's really important for us because lots of people don't know what a beneficiary designation is and why it is so important due to like default state rules. If anything, get some beneficiary designations in place, right?
Okay, yes. And I will breeze over this because it can become the weeds. But this is one thing I always like to tell people. You have that IRA or retirement account that maybe you set up before you started your own business, or maybe you have your own right now because you're still saving for yourself, which I heard on an earlier episode, which is something that you might have, or should have, I should say. You might have life insurance. And you may also have just any sort of investment accounts or something that maybe a relative has left to you that's in your name. Every single one of those accounts should have a beneficiary on it, and maybe even a contingent beneficiary, which would be like your bench team of people who would receive it when you die.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason you want this is because it is not assumed if, for example, your life insurance is, you just didn't fill out that part. And here you have $100,000 sitting there with no one to receive it.
Mm-hmm.
It can become a nightmare because you now have money in limbo. And there are a lot of people who have money in limbo because they never filled something out and they never checked with their bank on whether they have a beneficiary listed. When you work with an estate planning attorney, they're going to counsel you, and some of them will even do it for you. And so this is the sort of thing I tell people when they say they are broke. I say, you know what you can do when you are young and broke? Get you some life insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Give up getting some coffee twice a week. You have youth on your side and time, which means that when you buy term life, I don't know if you've heard of Dave Ramsey.
Oh my gosh, I am Dave Ramsey to the max, girlfriend.
I love Dave. Some term life insurance, okay, for 30 years, especially if you have, the younger you are, especially the younger you are.
Yeah, it's it's much less expensive when you're younger.
So cheap. Actually, the word is cheap.
Cheap.
And so for like $15 to $20, I'm talking, you could get like a $500,000 policy on you. And guess what that is? That is your estate that you are thinking you don't have, right? And I know it sounds like, well, who am I going to give it to? You can give it to your favorite niece. You can give it to charity that you really love. You can give it to Paige and me if you really, whatevs, we'll take it. But this is a way that I tell people, you feel like you don't have anything, set up a life insurance policy on yourself and see how your mindset changes about having a worth. Now, yes, the company has put a value on your life, but it is what they'll do is as long as you keep your payments up, they'll pay it out. My husband and I, we each have about $1 million on ourselves, which sounds like a Lifetime movie. Like, oh, took out $1 million policy on her husband. But whatever, we have that because we have 3 children. They're 5 and under. Guess what? We need to support them through their life. If we ever traveled and something happened to us, God forbid, I want them to be set. And that's why we do it. And we've had it ever since we got married. We just did it. And they came and they took our blood and they took our weight, found out the age of our parents and whether any of them had passed away. They ask you all these questions. They get all of your bodily samples. And then they give you a policy, and it's amazing. And you can afford that. That's something everyone on this call can afford.
Yes. Get life insurance from Iffy.
I don't sell it, but find you an agent. Get some term.
Find you an agent. But I'm saying Iffy is telling you, get it now.
Yes, get it now. Take that away with you. So anyway, when it comes to those beneficiary designation, you need to decide who's going to get all of your life stuff, all that money, all that cheddar. You need to give those assets to someone and set it up in a way that it's not going to be in limbo, but it's designated. And if you give it to
you can do this for your house too, right?
Oh, yeah. You mean like for your house? Yes. You can have somebody else put on your deed. So it's called a joint tenancy with a right of survivalship. That happens in bank accounts, but on your deed, it's the same thing. My husband and I are on our deed. If I pass away, the house is his. We're not going through any court proceedings.
Yes.
The reason for these beneficiary designations, and I forgot to say it, which is why I'm so happy you just brought that up, is because these are called non-probate assets, which means they pass outside of the court system. Basically, when that life insurance company sees your death certificate, they're just going to pay it out to whoever is like, hey, I'm the beneficiary. Here's the death certificate. Ka-ching, here's your check. And you get that money. And it's not going to be a hassle. It's just going to wherever you have designated it. It's huge.
It is.
I'm passionate about this. It is such a big deal. I don't sell it, but I'm like, please tell everybody.
Tell everybody. Yeah, I would say, well, what I'm getting from you is like life insurance, bank accounts, and houses, especially for all of us single women out there. Like those are the big things that we need to have with a beneficiary designation.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Don't let that go to court.
Please. It's too much. It's literally too much.
Yeah. And then you end up losing the money. Like I just try to make it so literal for people.
Yeah.
I'm like, if you have $100,000 life insurance, like you want that check to be written to somebody and you don't want it to be like depleted with further court proceedings because you have that amount in there for a reason. Like you're going to have, just way too complicated and way too expensive when we go to court. And that is, that's what we're talking about here is like ways to avoid that. And then, and I talk about it all the time too with like setting up your business correctly because we're trying to avoid expensive court fees later on. That's the whole point of it.
Right. And I'll just add this, okay? People often undervalue like their lives when it comes to thinking about setting up a will and a trust. You're like, I will do that later when I'm older. The life insurance thing will only be more expensive later. It's kind of like saving in a retirement account when you're 25 versus when you're 55. It's just like you earn so much more now by doing it than paying that premium at a higher amount later. And no one has ever thought, even if you leave, it sounds like 100,000. What's that going to do? Is that worth it? It's so cheap. Honestly, when you look at the numbers and they'll run them for free for you, you'll be like, why didn't I do this earlier? But just imagine being that person in your family or that one niece that you love so much and you give her a check, even if it's like $5,000. If I got $5,000 today, I'd still be happy. Much less if you give them like, here, I left $100,000 for your college education. You don't take out loans. You don't have to go and find money to start your business. Just you can set somebody else up. And this is why I love this. I'm so passionate about the legacy aspect of this and how even if you're from nothing, this can be a game changer for whomever you set it up for. So I'll leave it at that.
Oh, yes. I just love everything you're talking about. I'm just sitting over here, like I've said the whole episode, just nodding my head, being like, yes, girl, yes, yes, yes. Okay. We are all either dog moms or cat moms, and we love our pets, or maybe we have fishes, or maybe we have hedgehogs, whatever you may have. So what do we need to think about if something were to happen to us? What do we do with our pets?
Okay. So I have done a couple of pet trusts, and you can set up a way to care for your beloved pet when you die. I can't remember what your dog's name is, but I see your dog all the time, Paige. So
Sugar, cute. But we call her Shuggy or Shugs. Yes, she is all over Instagram and my website.
She's gorgeous. She looks like she's living a life of luxury. I want to be with her. She's amazing. Okay. So we know that pets are amazing. And a lot of people have such a strong attachment to their pets. And this is definitely something that our generation is very familiar with, growing up with pets and making sure that they're cared for if anything were to happen to you. You can write either a testamentary trust, which means that you would put a trust in your will that wouldn't go into effect until you die, where you say, I would like to leave the care of my beloved Shuggie to my sister or my mother or my best friend. And then you can also find ways in a trust to set up the ways to take care of your pet so that their veterinary visits, their grooming, their health, just like their enjoyment of life, maybe even boarding them, if that's something that you were doing like you were in the custom of doing, can continue. And the reason I say you have to set it up in some kind of way and assign somebody to take care of your trust is because you can't just outright leave money to your trust. You hear about like the Leona Helmsleys and then Karl Lagerfeld's cat also received a ton of money, but it has to be set up in a way. Like if you want to leave all your money to your pet, you can do that, but they can't go directly to them. You have to set it up in a way that somebody is in charge of that money. And it has to be someone you trust because, you know, it's going to be hard to enforce some of these things and make sure that they're taking care of the pet the way you are. But it's better than not saying anything and just letting your pet go to wherever or a shelter, you know, or to be adopted out by somebody you don't know.
Yep. I want all of these things for Shuggie Bear. She's gonna know where, well, Marco and I would both have to be gone because obviously one of us get hurt if something were to happen to the other person.
Right.
But yeah, like I don't want to not know what's going to happen to my dog. I love her so much. And
I love that.
Yeah. Okay. So very last thing is we've done all of these things, or we've set up not all of these things, because I know you guys are probably overwhelmed here listening. Like there is some steps here that you have to take. Do the ones that Iffy's talked about that make most sense for you right now, and then start going through this checklist. We've been writing this down on our iPhones or a piece of paper or our computer as Iffy's been talking about them. But when we start adding things into our estate planning, Iffy, what do we really need to ensure we do?
Well, after you've gone through all of this and you've set up your plan, you've found a great attorney that can help you, you have to tell your loved ones about the decisions you've made. Mm-hmm. You have to let them know by giving them a photocopy or letting them know where your original will is located, because that's what you need when you go to court, when they go to court on your behalf, whoever your executor is. You need to inform everyone, have a family meeting, let them know, hey, I did this. I encourage you to do it as well. That's the biggest part, is the communication. Don't do this in a vacuum, but do what you want, but let them know what you've done.
Yeah. Wow. Like that. You have given so much valuable information to the Legal Paige listeners today. I am just telling you, Iffy, this was a phenomenal episode. I cannot wait for people to come out of this being enlightened and feeling better about what's going to happen in the future if something were to occur. And we are being proactive millennial women and business owners as a whole. So I always like to follow up here and just ask you a couple legal lessons and experiences that you've faced on your business journey thus far. You're obviously not like building a photography business or anything.
Unfortunately.
It is pretty fun. But I loved the 3 things that you were going to tell our listeners as you leave this episode today, because I thought they were so poignant and really important for people to hear. So if you just want to talk briefly about these 3, and then we'll tell people where to find you.
Right. So my first nugget, my first piece of Iffy wisdom would be to set up your business correctly. And I think that when you do the setup and you lay the foundation, which includes, you know, making sure that you have insurance, making sure that you have contracts in place, making sure that you have laid up the infrastructure. For me, it was setting up all of my accounts, because there's certain rules that lawyers have to do, getting my malpractice insurance in case somebody does not think I did a good job with their case. And then also like a practice management software, which is how I handle all of my client information, my CRM, how I do my lead generation and all of that stuff. It was frightening when I looked at the list, But after I did it, I thought, oh my gosh, well, I've done it and I've laid my foundation. So that's something I would definitely tell you. Spend the time and do all of that. Lay the groundwork. Don't do it by word of mouth. I know Paige talks about contracts. Just don't say, okay, girl, I got you. That's not good enough. So definitely lay down a foundation and start running your business like a business immediately. The second thing I would say is do not be afraid. When you need help, ask for it. Be shameless about asking for it. I don't come from a family of lawyers. I actually come from a family of doctors, and none of them were helpful when I wanted to hang up my own shingle. And so I cold called lawyers, Google and Yelp, and they helped me set up my business. They really gave me forms. They gave me engagement letters. They told me what I needed to learn and gave me access to the education that I needed and said, hey, take this course or learn about this at this continuing legal education. So be shameless about it. But when you learn it, do good work. Over deliver, under promise and over deliver. Give them a wonderful client experience and always, always be honest, passionate, responsible, and bold in your offerings. So I would say that. Be bold and don't think you're an imposter because that's something we as women struggle so much with. You're not an imposter. You are at the table and you deserve to be there. So know your rates as well. And then the last thing I would say, sometimes on this entrepreneur journey, it's very lonely. You start putting things out there and maybe you're not getting responses or you're trying to sell things and people aren't buying it and you might feel very alone. So no matter what you do, you will face these naysayers that come or people that say, why don't you go back to your regular desk job and this side hustle or this new venture is a bad idea. Stay the course, do good work, pivot when you need to. And I always love this. I think it's a Dr. Seuss quote. I'm not sure though. It's that the people that mind don't matter and the people that matter don't mind. So always know that you are on this path and if this is what you're supposed to do, put in the time and don't expect instant results, but it will come to pass. I've watched Paige do this in her own business. We started on Instagram around the same time, I would say, because I was like, she's so cute, and she was just laying foundation and groundwork and pushing and learning and growing. And now she's amazing. And it wasn't overnight. And she has put in work as a lawyer. And so just keep on surrounding yourself with people like that who inspire you and encourage you and don't make you feel like you have to compete, but they spur you on to grow.
Yeah. Oh, well, you're so sweet. And thank you so much for that. And you are also just giving me all the feels with these 3 big takeaways and lessons and experiences for you as you've grown your business. I think it's true for everyone. And yeah, all of us women, we really need to ensure that we are being passionate and continually being bold, like you said, and don't keep your head up. Don't want to go down just because social media can be a sad place sometimes. Try to be the light for everyone else. If something bad is going down online, that's what I always try to do. And if you're so right, I coach businesses and I talk to people all the time, whether it's online or at my speaking events or on podcasts. And I'm just like, we're at this place where like, it doesn't happen overnight. And I think social media is so all in your face all the time. And people are like, how do you suddenly have 300,000 followers or something? And I'm like, girl, that person worked so hard to get those people. And business is ever changing. You have to continually work towards it every single day. So I hope you guys leave this episode feeling that way. And also make sure you get all of your estate planning things done.
Yes.
Okay. So where can they find you, Iffy? Because I want to reach out to you. Obviously, all you legal teachers will have this on the show notes. I will have it linked on all of my social media accounts. But Iffy, I want them to find you. So where do they go?
So the first place that you can find me is on Instagram. And I am at ee-beck-way Law. Ibekwe is my last name. I-B as in boy, E-K as in kite, W-E, Law. I'm also at ee-beck-way-law.com. And on Facebook, I am on facebook.com. And I think the / is ee-beck-way Lawyer. because somebody had law taken, and I'm like, who is this other Ibekwe that's taking my law? But so it's Ibekwe Lawyer on Facebook. Please follow me. Please ask me questions. I can give general legal advice. So I love talking to people on social media. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me in other places via my website.
Perfect. And you guys, as we end here, I just want you to know that I am going to link Iffy's blog post that she has on this topic called Hey Millennial Women. Estate planning is for you too. So make sure you go check out her blog. And then Iffy, I know that I am on your mailing list, and everyone else should go get on your mailing list too, because she has all kinds of really good free info to help you set up your wills and other documents. So we'll make sure to link that for you guys as well. Iffy, thank you so much for being on today. It has been a true joy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm truly honored. I love it. You're doing great work.
All right. Talk soon, Legal Pagers. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Legal Page Podcast. See, I told you being legally legit isn't so scary. Be sure to visit thelegalpage.com for all show notes. And it would be super awesome if you could head over to iTunes and leave a review. Last but not least, don't forget to join my free Facebook group for unlimited legal and biz Q&A. Chat soon, Legal Pagers.